you really can't understand the future without the psychedelic experience. History seems to be becoming more and more psychedelic, if by that we mean self-complexifying, interconnected, proceeding along unexpected developmental pathways, more and more concrescent, more and more at the behest of the dynamics of emergent properties that are unpredictable. Alfred North Whitehead said it's the business of the future to be dangerous. And of course, as we approach the millennium, this is the subject matter of every pundit and public speaker and street corner orator, because though it is simply on one level an abstraction, a turn of a zero, nevertheless, the calendar is the largest frame for our being that we allow the unconscious to generate. And the calendar is like a kind of geodesic structure inside of which being is caged. The Mayan calendrical cycle is coming to a close in 2012. In a way, on a scale of even tens of thousands of years, hardly to speak of millions of years, you could see our own calendar and the Mayan calendar as almost in locksync, differing only in a small percentage in their choice of a millennial or, in the case of the Maya, larger turning point. So no matter where in the spectrum of epistemological sophistication you lie, there is, I think, a sense of enormous pregnancy in these times. Vast processes are being summed up, and whole new cards are being dealt into the game. Indeed, whole new players are entering the game. So this is sort of what I want to talk about, not as seriously as my sleep-deprived solemnity might imply. Let me say a little bit about this business of the archetype of the circus and why I see that as conversationally a bridge for talking about the psychedelic experience and the unfolding future. First of all, the circus is a wonderful place for children. In fact, it's a celebration of the values of childhood, both individual childhood and archaic childhood. But it's also ambiguous. I'm sure my first awareness of Eros that I have any memory of was when I was a person so small that they were wrapped in a blanket and passed from hand to hand, and I saw a lady in a tiny two-piece spangled costume hanging by her teeth, working without nets up in the big top, and I got it. I got the Eros death dichotomy there. Similarly, in the circus, away from the light and the action, away from the center ring, are the exhibit halls, the thing in the bottle, the hermaphrodite, the fat lady, the goat-faced boy. In other words, realms of mutation, strangeness, dread for a child or anyone else with their wits about them, for that matter. And then the circus is a symbol for designated impropriety. When I was growing up on the west slope of Colorado in the town of Paonia, every 4th of July is Cherry Day, without a hint of irony. And a carnival always came to town. And we children were always told that in the week that the carnival was in town, we couldn't stay out and play past 9 o'clock because these strange people, some even of dark-skinned hue and so forth and so on, were there disequilibrating the normal social ecosystem. And then, of course, any child worth their salt wishes to run away to the circus. So it's a symbol of an alternative to bourgeois values, is what it is. So I see both the psychedelic experience and the future as having all these properties that I've just talked about, being more eccentric, more erotic, more menacing, more dynamically chaotic, more challenging, and more appealing to the inner child in each of us than the past has been. And as I say, it's what in Jungian psychology is called a coincidentia positorum. It's a union of opposites. It's not a thing which is all good or all bad, all up or all down. Like all real things, it manages to encapsulate into itself contradiction and this sense of tension that comes from that contradiction. Now, somebody hearing this might say, well, it's strange to connect the psychedelic experience to the future because isn't it archaic? In fact, perhaps a tool of use in our distant hunting and gathering past, but now to be put aside by science-adumbrating sophisticates such as ourselves. This is one way of knocking the psychedelic enterprise. But I completely differ with that because I believe that the only way to smooth our movement down the birth passageway here at the end of history is actually by going back and revivifying archaic values. That the journey through history took an enormous toll on our humanness, and that aspects of our being had to be suppressed or were suppressed. We can argue whether it was necessary or not. That science, Calvinism, urbanism, industrialism have all taken their share of an essential humanness that was intact as recently as 15,000, 20,000 years ago. In other words, we're not talking about biological evolution here. We're talking more about how culture as an enterprise has insulted the individual. We have all, whether we are Hottentots or Hasids or citizens of Houston, we have all made too many sacrifices in the name of fitting ourselves into the culture we find around us through the circumstances of our destiny. Culture, then, in my analysis, is perhaps enemy is too strong a term, but it's a toxic environment that one needs to negotiate with great care. And people who are so clueless that they never realize this, who imbibe their culture, who somehow exemplify its values, are dehumanized in the process. Because cultural ideals are always caricatures. They are somehow a kind of necessary shorthand for doing the business of human organization, but they are not true to the complexity of each and every one of us, not true to what I call the felt moment of immediate experience. In fact, it's that felt moment of immediate experience, whether in orgasm or in intoxication or simply in ordinary involvement with life, that culture is always making a claim against and trying to somehow minimalize or negotiate into a lesser position. Again, this has to do with the children wanting to run away from the village with the gypsy circus. Culture is felt to be stultifying. The archaic mode, and why I think it represents an ideal worth struggling to somehow bring back into expression, was a mode based on connectivity and reciprocity.